Well, at least I have a green notebook. Does that count?
Yes. Your name is.
File folder, I guess that. Scripture today is Matthew 4. We've been in 4 for quite a while. I'll talk about that in just a second. But verses 8 through 11. Again, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain. Of course, this any time in Matthew that Matthew talks about a mountain, it's a sacred place. So the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, all these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. Jesus said, away with you, Satan. For it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Well, here we are in the 5th Sunday of Lent. We have been lingering over these chapter 4 and Jesus in the wilderness. And I really am appreciative of that. Because when we linger on a text like this, it allows us to go deeper in it and understand, rather than just speed right through it. Oh yeah, we've seen that before. But go deep into it and find a place for our own reflection. And so I'm grateful for that. And with not only hanging out with Jesus in the wilderness for 5 weeks, and of course it doesn't hurt that for 2 weeks I spent time trying to figure out what I was going to say on Sunday. And that's, so that has been fun and interesting to me to be in that time of reflection. But I think that Jesus was compelled to the wilderness to do that kind of a reflection on some really difficult things that he needed to work out. And so for a long time, he was in the wilderness trying to figure this stuff out. And I like to think that rather than just being tempted, I like to think that Jesus wrestled with the good and the evil within himself in this time. That he had to really wrestle about that. That's a real human thing to do, because we are all created in the image of God. We have this spark of the divine in each and every one of us, all the time, 24/7. It's in you. But, however, we are also capable as human beings for unspeakable evil. It's within us. We see it every day. But it also means that we are capable for that. We're capable for love, and we're also capable to do some really damage. Jesus was compelled into the wilderness to wrestle with some really difficult decisions. But I love it that he said, Satan, take a hike. It's adios. Hit the road, Jack. If it only were that easy. If it were only that easy. When the text says that the devil took him up to the high place and showed him the kingdoms of the world, what do you think that looked like in Jesus' time? The kingdoms of the world. And I can tell you that probably most important in his life was dealing with the Roman occupation, because the world looked like the Roman Empire at that time. It had for over two generations that Rome had been there. And before Rome, it was the Greeks, and before the Greeks, it was somebody else, and before somebody else, it was the Egyptians. So they always had to deal with foreign occupation. And there were 2 storms that were brewing at this time. that I think brought context to it. First of all, the Roman Empire had a death grip on Israel and the areas, in that area for more than 2 generations. There was an undercurrent of living under that occupied their thoughts, their wishes, hopes, and the difficulty of that. The second storm was because of that. There was a messianic movement, a movement to look into the nation or the people of Israel, to see who would be the Messiah, who would be the Messiah. So, and it was an expected thing. It was expected that it would be a king of the Davidic lineage who would deliver Israel from the foreign bondage, and restore it to its golden age. So let's wrestle with this for a minute. The Messianic movement was led by 2 factions, 2 religious factions of the time. The one were the Pharisees, and the other one were the Zealots. And the Pharisees were all about the oral laws, what the oral sayings were along history. They thought that the Messiah was going to be a human that would appear as a physical deliverer of Israel from her troubles. Messiah will lead Israel to victory in battle against the hostile forces of the Roman Empire. That's what they believed. That's what they hoped. Now they were going to leave that up to God to deliver that. The other folks were the Zealots, and they weren't really a religious faction, but they were just more violent freedom fighters, and they wanted the job done yesterday, that the Messiah would be there. And I think that Jesus really had to wrestle with this. Jesus, I'm sure, asked the question, is this me? Am I to be a Pharisee? Is this me? Is this who I am? Is this what my purpose is going to be in life? Will I be that Messiah? And same with the Zealots. Jesus was asking, is this me? Is this who I am? Is this my purpose in life? John the Baptist later in the Gospels asked Jesus a question when John the Baptist was in prison just before his assassination. He said, "Are you the one to come, or do we wait for another?" I think Jesus, even before this was spoken, that he was thinking of that. And I think, like Tinker had said before, that Jesus always comes up with another option. There's another way, another path to walk. So this Messianic movement produced a number of messiahs, and they're in history that are written in the later 1st and 2nd centuries. They actually had names. Again, Jesus of Nazareth was one of them. But Rome knew how to handle rabble-rousers, people that stirred the pot, that caused a ruckus to unsettle the law and order of their oppression. They would humiliate, they would torture, make a public statement of what happens to those that challenge the status quo. They'd nail them up on the scaffold that they made and put them on notice so everybody could see. Jesus knew the consequences. History calls it crucifixion. We Christians call it the cross. But Jesus thought that there was a third alternative. If you just look at the scriptures, look at what Jesus did after he came out of the wilderness, his message was unfailingly about God's unconditional love, which welcomes and forgives. He taught his disciples to love your enemies. Can you imagine that? Love your enemies and turn the other cheek. That's so hard. But that's what he taught. On the night before he was crucified, he told Peter to put away your sword. Put away your sword. Then later in one of the Gospels, when Jesus was in front of Pontius Pilate, on the day he was crucified, Pilate said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" And Jesus looked at him square in the eyes, I'm sure, and said, "You have no power over me." Maybe it was as easy as telling the evil, to tell our evil thoughts to get lost. Maybe it was that easy. Maybe it was due to an overwhelming commitment to the acts of love, acts of compassion, and acts of right relationships, because there is the presence of God. So in the 20th and the 21st century, we call what Jesus did nonviolent resistance. Anybody heard of that, nonviolent resistance? So I want to talk a little bit about nonviolent resistance, maybe today and in these days. But the first thing I want to do is to take a little informal survey. Nobody's going to get graded on this. It's not a pass-fail. Your permanent record is not going to have your response on this. But it's about power, the word power. So I'd like to get a feel for what we think about power. So if you could raise your hand if you think power is evil. Power is evil? Anybody think about that? Maybe? Okay. You're not going to be judged on this. So just open yourself up. So the other, what's that? Okay, I know. I want to talk about the kinds of power in just a minute, but power as evil. How about power as good? Anybody have any thoughts about power as good? I really believe that power is neutral. Power can be good. It can be evil. And it depends on the kind of power. So thank you, Grace. Keep me moving on this. So there are three kinds of power that I know of, that I think of. One is power over somebody. Like Pontius Pilate thought he had power over Jesus, that he could run Jesus' life. There's also power within. Jesus had power within. I think we all have power within. That's good power also, good power within. But the third kind is power among. And we experience that when we work together for the common good. So power can be bad, power can be good. Power over, power within, power among. So what does it mean to resist? So nonviolent resistance. What does that look like? So the first thing that I think of when I think of resisting nonviolently is resisting oppressive acts of violence on this hand. Maybe it's not you that we're doing this. But okay, on the other side, it's resisting a violent response. And nonviolent resistance is daring to do both at the same time. That's what Jesus did. What does resisting look like in our day? It'll see something, say something. Showing up for what's right. And I can tell you that what's right has lots of different definitions. And that's a beautiful thing. Resisting is about protesting. It's about negotiating. It's about voting. It's about acting in love. It's about acting in compassion and right relationships. In the 20th century, there were some favorite prophets and poets that talked about nonviolent resistance. One of them is, hear these words, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. Peace is its own reward. That came from a Hindu from India. You ever heard of Gandhi? Next one is, nonviolence is just and powerful. It cuts without wounding and ennobles the one who wields it, a sword that heals. A black Christian from Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. The third one is, nothing can heal anger except compassion. Comes from a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, is his name. So reflecting on these words, in this time of Lent, we're still in the wilderness, folks. Can we reflect on these words? And when I reflect on them, I said, is this me? Is this who I am? Is this what gives my life purpose? So here we are at the end of Lent. Are we ready to come out of Lent and move on? The reflections that we've had in Lent have helped us get closer to God, closer to those around us, and makes us ready for what's next. But folks, we can't stay in the wilderness forever. That's where it starts, but that's not where it ends. In order to follow Jesus, in order to seek to be more like Him, we've got to strap on the sandals and get into life, to dare to follow in His footsteps. Nonviolent resistance happens not when life is easy, but it's when it's hardest, when the stakes are high, when the tensions are unbearable. So I was just wondering, we have this wonderful wall of crosses, and I understand the emotional thing about crosses that we have with the relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm wondering, however, if we could use a wall of sandals, a wall of sandals that help us to recognize the power of love, the power of compassion, and the power of right relationships as we follow in the footsteps of Jesus. Just a fun thought. Amen.